Your mind is the control center. Protect your peace, protect your discipline, protect your future. When stress takes over, your decisions suffer. When peace returns, power returns. Mental health is wealth protection. Digital block wellness. Real wealth starts with a healthy mind.
You know, usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there is this certain expectation of precision.
Yeah, totally.
Like, it feels almost like engineering, right? You break your arm, the x-ray shows that jagged white line on the screen, and the doctor just points at it and says, well, there it is.
Right. It's broken or not broken.
Exactly.
I mean, it is deeply comforting to look at health that way. We really like things to be visible and neatly categorized, treated as permanent, undeniable traits. You see the problem, you put a cast on it, and you just wait.
But then you step into the world of mental health, and suddenly people expect that exact same x-ray machine.
Oh, yeah, they really do.
There is this pervasive myth out there that mental health is just this simple binary. You either have depression and anxiety or you don't. You're either broken or you're fine.
Which is just not true.
Right. And the stack of materials we are diving into today completely shatters that idea. We've got neurobiology documentaries, psychology TED Talks, and even wealth protection strategies.
Quite the mix.
Yeah, it really is. And what they collectively reveal for you is that mental health is actually on a sliding scale. It's incredibly fluid.
And that fluidity is what actually gives us agency. It means we are not just, passive passengers in our own minds. We actually have access to the controls.
So our mission for you on this deep dive is to give you a shortcut. We want you to become exceptionally well-informed about the hidden biological mechanics of resilience.
And the actionable steps.
Yes, the surprisingly tiny actionable steps to protect your mind. Okay, let's unpack this.
Well, to move past the basic what of mental health and really dig into the why and the how, we have to connect cellular biology directly to your daily habits.
Right, because before anyone can fix a system, they have to understand the hardware.
Exactly.
So our sources took us deep into this really fascinating neuroscience coming out of the largest resilience center in Europe. It's located in Mainz, Germany.
And the way they're looking at resilience, it feels almost like science fiction.
It really does.
They are proving that resilience is not just a psychological attitude. It isn't just toughing it out or having a stiff upper lip. It's a highly measurable physical, biological process.
Measurable how? Exactly.
Well, at the Mainz Center, researchers track people's stress over long periods of time. And to measure that stress objectively, they don't just ask people to fill out a questionnaire about how they feel.
Right, because we all lie on those.
We absolutely do. So instead, they test hair samples for cortisol, which, is the main stress hormone.
The scale of that measurement is wild to me. Like 1 centimeter of hair equals 1 month of your stress history.
Yeah.
It is literally like looking at tree rings, but for human anxiety.
That is a perfect way to put it. And through this tree ring data, researchers are actually isolating the genetic factors of stress.
Okay, break that down for me.
So when we experience a stressful event, our brain activates a cascade that ultimately floods our body with cortisol. The goal is to help us fight or flee.
The classic survival mode.
Right. And eventually, those cortisol molecules bind to specific receptors in our cells. Once they connect, that receptor sends a message back to the brain saying, hey, the threat is over. We have enough cortisol now. You can turn off the alarm.
But for some people, that calm down signal never actually arrives at the brain, does it? The alarm just keeps ringing.
Yeah, and that happens because of the FKBP5 gene.
FKBP5, okay.
Yeah, so when some people experience intense stress, this specific gene activates, and it releases an enzyme. Think of this enzyme like a physical metallic wedge.
A wedge.
Yeah, it wedges itself right between the stress receptor and the cortisol molecule. It physically blocks the receptor from doing its job.
Wow.
Because the receptor is blocked, it can't tell the brain to turn off the alarm. So the brain just keeps firing, pumping out more stress hormones, and the person just cannot reach a state of calm.
And as if that wasn't enough, there is another gene they study. The MAOA gene.
Oh, right, the MAOA gene.
Yeah, it produces an enzyme that migrates into the space between our nerve cells. And that space is the exact highway where our happiness hormones, like serotonin and norepinephrine, are supposed to travel.
And the researchers literally refer to this enzyme as a happiness eater.
Which sounds terrifying.
It is, because if the MAOA gene becomes overactive, it produces far too much of this enzyme. The enzyme floods the highway, and literally degrades and eats away your serotonin before it can even do its job.
Okay, hold on. If my DNA is pumping out wedges that block my calm down signals and producing enzymes that actively eat my happiness,
Yeah.
am I just doomed from birth? I mean, this makes resilience sound like a purely genetic lottery. Like, if you have the wrong genes, you're just hardwired for anxiety.
Well, that assumes our genes are locked in stone, which brings up the incredibly cool science of epigenetics.
Ah, epigenetics.
Your DNA is not your destiny. Our environment, our daily experiences, and our habits can actually alter how our genes express themselves.
How so?
We can place chemical caps onto these specific stress genes. It's a process called methylation.
Chemical caps. You're saying my daily routine can physically put a lid on my DNA.
Exactly. It puts them to sleep. It silences the gene, so it stops producing those harmful enzymes.
That is incredible.
Researchers at the University of Freiburg proved this with patients who suffer from a severe, really debilitating fear of heights.
Okay.
They took blood samples to look at their genetic markers, then put them through 2 weeks of intense exposure therapy. They physically took them up a massive cathedral tower every single day.
Just repeatedly facing the fear.
Right. And after the therapy successfully helped them overcome their fear, the researchers drew blood again. The psychotherapy had literally put those chemical caps back onto the MAOA gene.
Wait, really? So updating their psychological approach actually updated their biological software?
Yes. Behavior physically altered gene expression.
That is staggering. But, I want to paint a clear picture for you of what true resilience actually looks like when our biology is working correctly. There is an experiment from Mainz involving mice that frames this perfectly.
Oh, the social stress experiment.
Yeah. So they take a small brown mouse and put it into a cage with a massive, highly aggressive white mouse. It's just an environment of total social stress.
Right.
They remove the brown mouse, wait, and repeat the cycle for 10 days.
It is the classic laboratory model for inducing chronic stress.
So after those 10 days, they introduce a choice. They put the stressed brown mouse in a new cage. On one side, the aggressive white mouse is behind bars. On the other side, a totally neutral, safe brown mouse is behind bars.
Now, intuitively, a lot of people might think a resilient mouse is one that has conquered its fear, right?
Yeah, one that marches right up to the dangerous white mouse and shows it isn't intimidated.
Because people constantly equate resilience with complete fearlessness.
Right, but what did the researchers actually find?
They found that marching up to the aggressive mouse isn't resilience. It is a catastrophic failure to learn from danger.
Wow.
The truly resilient mouse was the one that accurately distinguished between the two environments. It kept a very healthy, cautious distance from the dangerous white mouse, recognizing the legitimate threat.
But it was okay with the other mouse.
Yeah, it comfortably explored and interacted with the safe brown mouse. Resilience is not blindly ignoring danger. It is accurate threat assessment.
Translating that to human life, I guess a resilient nervous system knows that a genuinely dangerous situation requires caution.
Absolutely.
But it also knows that your boss sending a vaguely worded email on a Tuesday is a neutral brown mouse, not the aggressive white mouse. It shouldn't trigger the global alarm system.
Exactly. So if we know we can update our biological software to assess these threats accurately, the next logical question is what tools we use to do that.
Right. What is the keyboard we use to type in this new code?
The sources point heavily toward physical movement, but not in the way fitness magazines talk about it.
Right, like the story of Leon Taylor. As a kid, he was incredibly hyperactive. He wouldn't sleep. He was constantly moving, basically driving his parents and teachers to the brink.
Yeah, the family doctor labeled him a problem child.
And formally offered to sedate him with medication, but his parents refused. Instead of a chemical sedative, they prescribed relentless physical movement. Gymnastics, martial arts, swimming, just anything to channel that energy.
And it worked.
It worked so well, he eventually channeled it into diving and went on to become an Olympic diver.
Which is an amazing story, but the underlying neuroscience of why that strategy worked is profound.
What's happening in the brain there?
Well, when you begin to move your body vigorously, your nervous system actually interprets this as a moment of stress. On a primal level, it thinks you are fighting for your life or fleeing a predator.
Okay.
To protect your brain from the damage of this perceived stress, your system releases endorphins to dull physical pain, and crucially, it releases a protein called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor.
I've had BDNF described as miracle grow for the brain.
That's a great way to put it.
It acts like a powerful fertilizer that helps your neurons grow, stay healthy, and form new connections with each other. It's physically building the architecture of mental resilience.
We know movement creates this brain fertilizer. Clinical researcher Joe Risser highlights some extreme examples of this in the sources, pointing to a man named George Hood who held a plank for over 10 hours.
10 hours.
Yeah. He also highlights Daniel, a patient with a disease called CRPS. CRPS causes excruciating chronic burning pain, yet Daniel managed to hold a plank for over 9 hours.
Wait, I need to pause here. You just said the nervous system thinks we are fleeing a predator, so it releases this fertilizer.
Right.
But a plank is the exact opposite of fleeing. You are holding completely rigidly still. Why would a plank generate this biological response?
That's the fascinating part. It comes down to a critical nuance about how BDNF is produced, which we learned from animal studies.
Okay, what nuance?
Exhausting, mindless physical exercise, like making a mouse swim continuously in a straight line, produces far less BDNF than an exercise that requires extreme mental focus, like navigating a complex maze.
Oh, I see.
While a plank involves staying still, it is intensely physically demanding. But more importantly, as George Hood noted, holding a plank for hours is 90% mental.
Because you have to fight your own brain to stay in it.
Exactly. You have to focus with everything you have to keep your body in that position. It is that specific combination of physical strain and extreme mental focus that makes the plank one of the most efficient BDNF generators we know of.
But there is a massive caveat in the sources here. You can't just punish yourself with grueling exercise and expect your brain to heal.
No, definitely not.
Take Leon Taylor, the Olympic diver we talked about. He was training 7 hours a day. By all biological logic, he was swimming in BDNF. Yet, after a severe injury in 2001, he fell into a deep clinical depression.
He was doing all the movement, but he was stuck in a really dark place.
Right. The movement had become entirely disconnected from its original purpose. He had lost the joy. His training had become purely a source of pressure, expectation, and psychological stress.
And it wasn't until his mentor pulled him aside and reminded him that he originally started diving because it was fun.
He actually had to actively force a smile during his training sessions just to break the negative psychological spiral.
Wow.
So the takeaway isn't to force yourself onto a treadmill if you absolutely hate running. You have to find your specific movement, the movement that brings you joy.
Whether that's yoga, weightlifting, or, as Leon hilariously suggested in his talk, finding an underground early morning sober rave.
Yeah, that was a great line.
Joy is the catalyst. It is the magic ingredient that allows the biological benefits of the movement to actually take root and repair the nervous system.
Let's bring this down to earth for a second, though. Holding a 10-hour plank, becoming an Olympic athlete, or tracking down an underground sober rave.
Sounds exhausting.
Yeah. If you are listening to this on your commute or while folding laundry, that might sound incredibly intimidating. If the goal is building a resilient biology, how do you actually apply this without getting completely overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the effort?
Well, we have to completely shift our perspective on motivation. Huge willpower-driven lifestyle overhauls almost always fail.
Yeah, like signing up for a 5 a.m. extreme boot camp when you haven't worked out in 3 years.
Right. You can willpower your way through it for about 6 days, but then your nervous system crashes, you quit, and you end up feeling significantly worse than when you started.
Which brings us to the concept of microhabits, popularized by James Clear in Atomic Habits.
Yes.
A perfect illustration of this from our sources is the British cycling team. Historically, they were notoriously terrible.
Just awful.
A new performance director comes in, and his strategy isn't to yell at them to pedal harder or double their training hours. He looks for tiny 1% improvements.
Just 1%.
Yeah. They painted the inside of their transport vans pristine white. Why? So they could spot microscopic specks of dust that might get into the bike gears and degrade performance by a fraction of a percent.
That is so specific.
And they tracked their sleep down to the mattress quality. These microscopic, seemingly insignificant changes compounded over time, and they went on to completely dominate the Olympics and the Tour de France.
Mapping that 1% snowball effect onto mental health creates an incredibly sustainable timeline for you.
Let's hear the timeline.
Okay, in January, you don't declare you are going to meditate for an hour a day. You just start taking a daily vitamin. That is the entire resolution.
Okay, simple enough.
Maybe that gives you 1% more energy. In February, you take that tiny bit of extra energy and use it to set one boundary, like turning off your email notifications after 5 p.m.
Which reduces your daily cognitive overload, giving you another 1% boost in baseline energy.
Right. In March, you use that newly freed up energy to add a simple 10-minute walk outside. That walk gives you a slight BDNF boost and improves your sleep quality.
So by May, all these 1% changes have compounded seamlessly, and you suddenly have 72 extra minutes of energy and focus every single day.
Exactly. You are changing your biology through sustainable systems, not sheer brute force.
Our sources, which include insights from dozens of working therapists, provided a goldmine of these tiny, actionable micro-habits. But rather than listing them all, let's look at the biological mechanisms behind two of the most effective ones.
Sure.
Let's start with the 5-4-3-2-1 technique. Therapists recommend this for immediate grounding when a panic attack hits.
You find 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste.
But how does counting a few objects in a room stop a biological freakout?
It works because it forces an override in your brain's processing centers. When panic hits, your amygdala, the brain's fear center, is working in overdrive, projecting future catastrophes.
Just spinning out of control.
Yeah. By forcing yourself to engage your visual cortex to find 5 objects and your somatosensory cortex to register touch, you are literally stealing blood flow and electrical activity away from the amygdala.
You are forcing the brain back into the present physical environment.
Exactly. Biologically, this sensory override drops your heart rate, signals safety, and prevents that FKBP5 gene from releasing the wedge enzyme we talked about earlier. It clears the path for the calm down signal.
That makes so much sense. You are manually shifting the gears of your nervous system.
What was his second concept?
The second one that stood out is overcoming the chained elephant. The metaphor goes like this. A baby elephant is tied to a small wooden peg in the ground. It tries to break free, but it's too small, so it gives up.
And then it grows up.
Right. As it grows into a massive adult, it could easily snap the peg with one step, but it doesn't even try. It has learned that it is helpless.
Learned helplessness is a massive barrier to resilience. When we feel we have no control over our stress, our biology becomes passive. The cortisol just washes over us.
So how do you break the chain?
You have to deliberately focus on small moments of control. One psychologist in our sources teaches kids to deliberately remember tiny weekend successes. Things like, I baked a cake for my grandma and she liked it, or I organized my room.
But how does remembering baking a cake rewire a stress response?
Because taking deliberate action and seeing a positive result triggers a dopamine release. It engages the reward pathways in the brain.
Okay, I see where this is going.
When you regularly remind your brain that your actions have positive outcomes, no matter how small, you create new neural pathways that reject helplessness.
And dopamine is related to serotonin, right?
Yes. This dopamine release actually supports the production of serotonin, actively fighting back against that happiness eater enzyme. Remembering those tiny victories breaks the biological illusion of helplessness.
So we have the ability to silence stress genes, fertilize our brains with focused movement, and rewire our panic responses with 1% micro habits.
We really do.
But this brings us to a foundational question. Why go through all this trouble? Why is it so absolutely vital to put all this deliberate effort into our mental health?
Because your mind is the ultimate control center of your entire life. If the control center is compromised, every other aspect of your life starts leaking.
When you look at the wealth protection strategies in our stack, they point out something shocking about this. They demand a total redefinition of what wealth actually is.
Right. Because society screams at us that wealth is assets, income portfolios, and social media followers.
But if you have all of those external markers of success and your mind is constantly operating in survival mode, like if you cannot sit quietly in a room and feel peace, you are practically broke.
Protecting your mental health is the truest form of wealth protection.
The sources ask a direct, incredibly uncomfortable question that I want to pass on to you. When you are stressed, do you seek relief or do you seek repair?
The distinction between those two words dictates the trajectory of your life.
Let's talk about relief first.
Relief is temporary and often destructive. It is buying a gadget you don't need to get a dopamine hit, stress eating, or doom scrolling for 4 hours. The package arrives. The distraction ends, but the underlying pressure is completely unchanged.
And repair?
Repair is intentional. It is doing the difficult work of addressing the root cause of the pressure.
Because if you spend your life just chasing relief, unmanaged stress leads to literal, measurable financial and relational leaks. You start buying things to soothe a dysregulated nervous system.
Yeah.
Think about anxiety. Anxiety lies to you. It makes you feel like you are always running out of time, like you're constantly behind. And when you feel behind, you rush.
And rushing causes massive mistakes.
Exactly. You take a terrible business deal because you are operating out of panic instead of peace. You partner with the wrong person because your anxiety tells you it's your last chance.
You end up letting dysregulated emotions make long-term decisions that have very real, very expensive consequences.
And ego plays a massive role in this leakage too, doesn't it?
Oh, ego is huge here. Ego makes people take wild risks they don't understand just to project an image of fearlessness. Ego refuses to ask for help until the damage is entirely irreversible.
What's the alternative?
Humility. The quiet ability to say, I need to slow down, or I am not okay right now. That is a foundational pillar of mental wealth.
To protect that wealth, to protect the control center, you need a vault. You need boundaries.
And boundaries are deeply misunderstood. People often view them as aggressive walls built out of bitterness to keep the world away.
What should they be?
Healthy boundaries are simply doors managed with wisdom.
Doors managed with wisdom. I love that. Saying no to a toxic social obligation, refusing to engage with work emails after 5 p.m., or intentionally curating your social media to block out the 247 outrage cycle.
That is not being selfish.
No, you are protecting your ultimate non-renewable assets. Your time, your cognitive focus, and your energy. You can be a deeply kind, generous person and still have a door that locks.
Because if everything in the world has unrestricted access to you, nothing is protected. The wealthiest, most resilient version of you cannot be built if you're constantly driven by panic and drained by unlimited access.
We have covered a massive amount of ground on this deep dive. We started at the microscopic cellular level, learning that our genetic code is not a life sentence. We can use epigenetics to put chemical caps on our stress genes. We learned how to generate the brain fertilizer, BDNF, through focused movement, provided we anchor that movement in joy.
Such a crucial point.
We explored the biology behind 1% micro-habits, like sensory grounding and rejecting learned helplessness. And we framed mental health as the ultimate vault protecting the wealth of your life.
So if you are absorbing all of this and trying to figure out what you are actually protecting your mind for, there was one final clarifying exercise from our sources.
The 100th birthday test.
Yeah. Imagine you are turning 100 years old. You are sitting in a room surrounded by the people you love most. What are they saying about you? What do they say you stood for during your life?
It's a heavy question.
It is. The things they say in that imaginary room, those are your actual core values. You find lasting meaning by aligning your daily habits with those values, not by chasing fleeting moments of relief.
We started this conversation talking about the X-ray machine, the comforting but false idea that mental health is a clean snapshot of broken or not broken. It isn't a snapshot. It is a living, breathing biological ecosystem. It is a sliding scale, and you have the biological agency to move the needle.
You really do.
Which leaves you with this final thought. If our biology absolutely requires slow, steady compounding habits to build resilience, yet we live in a culture that relentlessly demands instant gratification, 247 access, and permanent hustle,
Yeah.
isn't prioritizing your mental health the ultimate act of rebellion?
That is something to think about. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
Take care of your most valuable asset, your mind.